everybody. Thank you for hanging in there at 4 o'clock, right? New campus, new location, but we're in Florida, and we're a Florida-based company up in Jacksonville, about 4.5-hour drive north of here. Cadrenal Therapeutics, and thanks again to the entire Noble team for having us. We're a new IPO of January of this year, so it's our first time coming to NobleCon, but it won't be the last. Forward-looking statements, I will be making some, so for your review. Cadrenal Therapeutics, we're focusing on developing a drug candidate called ticagrelor. It may sound familiar to warfarin. Everybody in the room, I assume, have a family member or a friend that's been on a blood thinner. Warfarin, been around for 70 years. It used to be branded called Coumadin. These days, you may be driving around your state or your city and you hear ads by Eliquis. That's the next generation that came out about 10, 12 years ago. What is ticagrelor? Ticagrelor is the same class as warfarin, a vitamin K antagonist. It's a late-stage drug candidate, meaning we've done 11, we as in us and the previous owners of ticagrelor, 11 clinical trials, safety database over 1,000 patients. It's an oral and reversible. The key word is reversible. It's been around for, the class has been around for 70 years, and the drug is to prevent heart attacks and strokes in patients who may develop blood clots and require lifelong anticoagulation or blood thinners. In our case, we're targeting rare medical conditions, so anticoagulation, lifelong, in rare medical conditions where the legacy warfarin, or Coumadin used to be called when it was not genericized, have failed to achieve the stable anticoagulation. And these three areas are patients with end-stage kidney disease, GFR below 15, who may be on dialysis or about to go on dialysis. These patients also have concurrent irregular heartbeat, atrial fibrillation, AFib. So in ESKD with AFib, the FDA has already granted ticagrelor as a orphan drug, as well as fast-track designation. Cadrenal is also working on two other designations, which we have announced in our releases. Applications to get in the left ventricular assist device, which is a pump for heart failure patients. They're part of this group called implanted medical devices. And anytime you put a mechanical heart valve, left ventricular device, implanted device requires a blood thinner. And the only ones available that's very unreliable is warfarin. The newer class, we call it the direct oral acting anticoagulants, or DOACs. We call them the Eliquis class. They are Xarelto, Eliquis, Pradaxa, and Cerveza. They're contraindicated. And then the third category is a autoimmune disease called antiphospholipid syndrome, or APS. It's a condition similar to lupus. The body overproduces antibodies, which then causes blood clots, which then requires the patients to have anticoagulation. So the other part about ticagrelor is most drugs are discovered. Few drugs are designed. So, for example, ticagrelor 70 years ago, warfarin 70 years ago started as a rat poison, and the Wisconsin University Alumni Research Fund (WARF) took it and developed it to a blood thinner. Another drug called nitroglycerin, or anti-agonal, that's the power explosive. Ticagrelor was specifically designed to replace warfarin, and the difference is the metabolism. And it's not metabolized through the P450, where a lot of drugs interact and causes drug-drug interactions. And kidney impairment does not affect the PK, or the uptake of ticagrelor, that it does to warfarin. So with that and the FDA's guidance and the phase 2-3 that was done, this is where the path that we're pursuing in end-stage renal disease or end-stage kidney disease with AFib. We have a phase 3 remaining. It's 500 patients, half on ticagrelor, half on placebo, with the outcomes endpoints. About $90 million has been invested in the development and regulatory advances for ticagrelor. That's just not in the cap table because, as I mentioned, several owners have had it, but it's not reflected in our current cap table. And I think the U.S. market potential for ticagrelor exceeds $2 billion for these three medical conditions that we're pursuing. As I mentioned even in the previous slide, until about 2010, the only blood thinner that was widely used was warfarin, brand name Coumadin, promoted then by DuPont, then acquired by BMS. Between 2010 and 2015, new drugs came out. They're called the factor 10 inhibitors, Eliquis, Xarelto, Savaysa, and Pradaxa. What's not used, they're not used in those rare medical conditions. Not in the implanted medical device, not in mechanical heart valves. They are successful in the broader indications of atrial fibrillation and the bigger thrombosis. And ongoing and new research in the factor 11s are not targeted in the three rare medical conditions that we're targeting. Those are all factor 11s, and one of them was announced that, it was discontinued by Bayer in research, public information that was announced about 3 weeks ago. Once again, this is the ad. It's run all over radio. The takeaway is it's a drug that's widely used for patients who require a blood thinner, but definitely do not take it if you have an artificial heart valve, and it's not for patients who have APS. Those are the area we're focusing on. Now, they did not mention about end-stage kidney disease with AFib, but those are 2 of the 3 conditions that we are focused on. So once again, where areas where warfarin hasn't been effective or reliable, and in the areas where the Eliquis class of drugs are not being used or are contraindicated, and also the factor 11s, which are in development now by the major pharmaceutical companies, the global ones, they're not targeting those rare medical conditions. I think I forgot to mention earlier, just for the sake of common knowledge, when a drug is orphan designated or for a rare disease, it means the US FDA has deemed that there's no treatment. There's an unmet medical condition that affects less than 200,000 patients in the US, and that upon approval, such orphan designated drug would get 7 years of exclusivity marketing in the United States, and a number of other waivers and fees. Tecarfarin was granted orphan drug designation as well as fast track. As I mentioned earlier, most drugs are invented, some are specifically designed. Tecarfarin was specifically designed to solve warfarin's major problems, and that is the ability to control INR, the measurement of effectiveness in the anticoagulation and the time and therapeutic range. The metabolism is different because warfarin is metabolized through the P450, which, it's like a traffic jam. All these drugs, concomitant diseases, require multiple drugs. They're competing in that. And so there's the competition, the drug-drug interaction issues, but also generic variants. And so unreliable anticoagulation with warfarin patients, highly monitoring, also diet restrictions. Tecarfarin was designed to solve that major metabolism problem. Tecarfarin is metabolized throughout the body, tissue esterases, that's everywhere in the body, which ultimately that we're going to show is more reliable and a stable PK profile, which leads to stable anticoagulation and a proven method of action in these 3 specific rare medical conditions. So not the overall thrombosis, not the big AFib, but in end-stage renal disease with AFib, in patients with left ventricular assist device, and in patients who have APS. This is our pipeline for rare medical conditions for tecarfarin. As I mentioned, the FDA has already designated tecarfarin with the orphan drug designation and fast track granted for end-stage kidney disease with the concomitant atrial fibrillation. And that's ready to enter phase 3. And the other 2, left ventricular assist device and antiphospholipid syndrome, we're developing and have requested orphan drug designation and in communication with the agency. When we talk about rare diseases and orphan drug designations, once again, that's 7 years of exclusivity, but also they add up. Less patients, but also premium pricing. And I'll show you, two examples of recent cardiovascular drugs that have been approved and what the pricing are for those. But essentially, these three rare medical conditions who require chronic anticoagulation, the total market potential based on our research, large research company and management estimate, is over $2 billion of peak potential market. The two drugs that I just mentioned before this slide are cardiovascular drugs that have been approved in the last several years. The first one being Camzyos, which was developed by a company called Myocardia, which then was acquired by BMS, taken through its pivotal phase 3, and it was approved, I believe, last year. If you look at the pivotal trial, 251 patients against placebo, pricing at almost $90,000 a year for patients who required this drug to treat a rare cardiomyopathy. And then on the other side, FoldRx was acquired by Pfizer a number of years ago, which continued the development of the drug now called Vyndaqel and Vyndamax. Orphan, Fast Track, Priority Review, Breakthrough Therapy designations from the FDA based on a trial of 441 patients also against placebo. That drug was and is priced at $225,000 a year, making it the most expensive cardiovascular drug on the market. What that tells you that the market and reimbursement are possible for rare, orphan, effective cardiovascular drug for rare cardiovascular conditions, which is the area that we're operating in. So why are we developing tecarfarin now? And this is my second to the last slide. It's late in the afternoon. Basically, the market with 70 years of warfarin was not good enough. It was unreliable, and patients required monitoring and the reversibility and the diet restrictions. So our industry came up with the newer drugs that came out, Eliquis, Xarelto, and the likes. But they too aren't meeting the needs of patients in the three rare medical conditions that we're focusing on. So once again, patients who require chronic anticoagulation where warfarin is not effective or remains uncontrolled, and where the Eliquis class of drugs are either contraindicated or not used. The pathway for tecarfarin under FDA guidance, it's orphan designated. The trial has been reviewed by the FDA, approximately 500 patients, half on tecarfarin, half on placebo, with outcomes, measuring MACE time to MACE, major adverse cardiac events, and was also granted fast track by the FDA earlier this year, providing 7 years of exclusive marketing exclusivity in the United States from the date of approval, as well as other incentive, including fee waivers. The landscape, right? People ask, well, how can a small company developing tecarfarin go up against big pharma? And I think I've outlined it. We're not going after the large thrombosis. We're not going after AFib. We're going after rare medical conditions that for patients who required anticoagulation in those three specific areas where the Eliquis class of drugs are not being used or contraindicated, and the factor 11s, one which are they've been abandoned, are not being researched. Tecarfarin's also in a class called vitamin K antagonist. It has a proven mechanism of action through 70 years, warfarin being the only really widely used VKA on the market. And it's an effective oral and reversible anticoagulant with an improved safety profile because of its difference in metabolism with a pathway that's not the P450, where kidney impairment does not affect the PK of tecarfarin as it did warfarin in a trial that was done in 2016. I think lastly, when we ask investors and supporters about the possibility of tecarfarin, it's a large market potential. It's over $2 billion in the three rare cardiovascular disease area which require anticoagulation. Who's involved? I personally have been working on tecarfarin since 2017. Dr. Losordo is a cardiologist, and he's been a drug development leader in several for cardiovascular company. Matthew Zott and I worked together in California on several companies over 15 years ago, and then we have a number of directors of big public companies as well as biotech development companies, Dr. Steve Zelenkowski, Dr. Glenn Wilson, and then Rob Lisicki, who just came out of some very large deals involving Arena, Regeneron, and worked also for Daiichi Sankyo and Amgen in cardiometabolic as well as cardiovascular. With that, I said I would not get the 5-minute warning. Thank you for your time, and I will take some questions over in the breakout area across the hall. Thank you very much.
With more than 6,000 small and micro-cap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple, then ChannelCheck truly is the orchard. It's an investor community where you can access independent Wall Street research, advanced market data, balanced news, corporate videos, and podcasts. You can even register to attend in-person Meet the Management Series lunches, and to be part of the preeminent annual Small and Microcap Investor Conference, NobleCon. And here's the best news. Since ChannelCheck is sponsored by the featured companies, premium membership requires no investment. It's absolutely free. So check it out. Log in today. Find out why ChannelCheck is North America's leading source of research on the companies that just may change the world.